Welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining in for this presentation. I have the pleasure to talk about borderline products. We are still in the animal health session, so we are talking about borderline products in the animal health arena. And basically, I would like to draw your attention to the opportunities that may be there if you don't want to follow the strict regulations of the veterinary medicinal products regulation. And there are obviously, like on the human market, also other opportunities in the animal health market, but they are significantly different than on the human side. Nevertheless, we will have to discuss certainly again the veterinary medicinal products definitions, because this is, and I will explain why, one of the primary guidance documents that at least you have always the potential to end up in a veterinary medicinal product if you can't clearly differentiate it. So a few words to borderline products in itself. So it's basically products which may give the opportunity to license them in different ways. And there is a problem, and it is a growing problem during the last years with new legislation coming in to clearly define where to categorize your product. It's obviously a problem for the pharmaceutical, the feed industry, biocide industry, and other companies who basically intend to market such products. But it's also for the veterinarians and pharmacists, if they have which route they have to follow, under which definitions they are allowed to sell these products. And obviously at the end also the owner of the pets or the food producing animals may be involved following some of their regulations. We are in a strictly regulated environment. On the other hand, of course, it is important to keep the competition in a fair way between the products. At least that is a political goal, that if there is significantly less requirements, that then maybe there is less opportunities, less profit or whatever for the industry. And then we have, at least I'm more concentrating here today on the European Union, but it's similar in the more developed markets. We have different dossier requirements by member states of the EU even. We have different interpretations of that. We have different GMP requirements as an example. Distribution options will certainly play a key role for any applicant or anybody who wants to sell the products. And there's also some publicity involved. So I would like to draw your attention here to these basically products that we are talking about. And we have principal regulations, and that are basically under the umbrella. The biggest one here in green is basically the feed, and we have a specific regulations there on feed additives, on medicated feeding stuffs, and dietetic feed, and I will come to that later. And all of them have a potential to make some certain claims which may go into a health claim, and where you may have an issue to discuss that or to differentiate that from claims you may want to do for veterinary medicines. We also have obviously other, on the left-hand side, other terms, I would call it, which basically some of them are known in the animal health arena, some are not. So medical devices, I will extrapolate later, we don't have in the animal health arena. So there is no specific regulation on that or directive as we have on the human side. Similarly, we don't have that for cosmetics. We have a new, just implemented new regulation for the biocides, and we'll explain that a little bit more. So fundamental regulations are existing for the veterinary medicinal products, for the biocides, and in the feed sector. So the biocides regulation is the 528/2012, which came into effect with the 1st of September of this year, so just a month ago. We have the regulation 1831 of 2003 in Europe, which defines the feed additives, and these two basically are regulations similar to the feed intended for particular nutritional purposes, which is basically coming out of the feed regulation 767 of 2009. And then we have the cosmetics for animals. As I mentioned, we don't have anything in legislation. We don't have anything in legislation of medical devices. And then we have kind of the new therapies, where obviously which are very interesting for the innovative companies, but which may not directly fall under the medical legislation, and there is then either nothing or it falls under some specific legislation. So just to cover a little bit again, but Beate has already explained that, obviously a medicinal product is linked to the term of treating or preventing disease in animals. So that is what we call under the term of presentation, how we present the animal, the product. And the other one is by function, and that is exerting a pharmacological, immunological, or metabolic action, or making a medical diagnosis. The Directive 2001/82, which defines this in Article 2, goes on that it applies to veterinary medicinal products, including premixes for medicating feeding stuffs, intended to be placed on the market in member states and prepared industrially or by a method involving any industrial processes. So if we don't have these kind of terms, we may also not fall under this directive. But then we have the second paragraph in this article, which is quite important. In cases of doubt, where, taking into account all its characteristics, a product may fall within the definition of a veterinary medicinal product and within the definition of a product covered by other community legislation, the provisions of this directive shall apply. So if you don't categorize your product very clearly as a non-veterinary medicinal product, you will fall under the veterinary medicinal products, and therefore you will always have to start to assess your product from that perspective. And if we look at the presentations here, how they are sold, on the left-hand side you have products that fall under the category of feed and feed additives or dietetic feeds. On the right-hand side, veterinary medicinal products. For the consumer, if they are basically stored in a pharmacist's store, they can't really differentiate it by the presentation, and that's what is meant by it. Obviously, you have to read what is written on it, and that gives a very valuable added value for this. So in Article 3 of the directive, it's defined what it is not a VMP, and that is feeding stuffs, inactivated immunological VMPs manufactured from pathogens, antigens from an animal and used for its treatment, which we call autologous vaccines. So basically specifically produced for either that animal or for the group of animals. VMPs based on radioactive isotopes, or medicinal products intended for research and development trials. Go on with the feed and feed additive part. So obviously feed, there is a fundamental thing that sometimes is missed if we talk to clients. There must be a nutritional purpose. So feed, there must be something where you can show a nutritional purpose of it as a fundamental requirement. Feed is defined any substance or product, including additives, whether processed, partially processed, or unprocessed, intended to be used for oral feeding to animals. Yeah? Definition of feed does not include water, in contrast to on the human side, by the way. And if you want to make claims, you can do so, but they must be scientifically substantiated. And the responsibility that the claim is substantiated is basically with the person responsible for the labeling of the feed you place on the market. There is clear definitions for a positive list, what is seen as feed, and that's the Catalogue of Feed Materials, which is Regulation 68/2013, the last update, so it's regularly updated if something new is basically put on that list. There is also a voluntary list created by the Industry Association for Feed Additives is here FEFANA, where you can basically put on new feed products that are not in the catalog, and that's called the register, and basically by that make public that you intend to sell this product under a feed label. But this register has not a legal component, so it could be that any inspector finding your product on the market labeled as feed will argue that it is not feed, and therefore if you make different dangerous claims or into the medicinal area, you might be really at danger. A very specific one is dietetic feed, what we also call PANATs, particular nutritional purposes, so feeding stuffs for that. And there is a list, again, defined in regulation, and European Regulation 2008/38, which basically gives you the specific label claims that you are allowed to make if your product falls under the category of this dietetic feed. So to remember is, if you intend to look into these borderline products and where you may end up, first of all is, has your feed or your oral product a nutritional purpose? And what is your objective, verifiable claim that you want to make for this? If you want to claim prevention and treatment, then it's always a veterinary medicinal product, unless you can basically modify these claims or downgrade them, but you can never talk about prevention or treatment of disease. And you have still, if you want to make claims, to substantiate that. There is just a recent guideline that was also developed by the Industry Association, has been agreed by the Commission, how to run the studies, but it is not easy. Obviously, feed products often exert a smaller effect than a veterinary medicinal product, and therefore it's not easy to substantiate the claim in 3 statistically significant trials that are requested here if you are talking about a feed additive that you want to make zootechnical claims. And there we come into the definitions of feed additives. These are substances, microorganisms, or preparations other than feed material and premixtures which are intentionally added to feed or water in order to perform, in particular, one or more of the functions mentioned in the Article 5 of Regulation 1831/2003. And that is different effects to modify the characteristics of feed, characteristics of the animal products that derive from the animals, favorably affect the color of ornamental fish and birds, satisfy nutritional needs, favorably affect the environment, favorably affect animal production, so technical claims, performance or welfare, particularly by affecting the gastrointestinal flora or digestibility of feeding stuffs. And finally, the coccidiostat and the histomonostats, which basically target specific diseases, and I would say fundamentally would normally belong under the regulation for veterinary medicinal products, but because they are always mixed into feed, that is basically practically considered by the Commission as well as the industry as unfeasible, and therefore they fall under the category of feed additives. That makes it possible that the feed mills can basically process this without additional requirement. We have therefore technological additives, sensory additives, nutritional additives, the zootechnical additives, and again the coccidiostats. There is a specific term on antimicrobial or antibiotic effects, and that states very clearly that a feed additive cannot be an antibiotic. So an antibiotic other than coccidiostats or histomonostats acting against microbes shall not be authorized as feed additives. So they will be veterinary medicinal products. For the borderline definitions, and that's what I'm talking about, the most relevant of all these categories that I ran through here in the feed additives is the zootechnical feed additive, because you can really do substantial claims here. And we differentiate here digestibility enhancers, so basically they have an effect on the diet, but basically through action on target feed materials, they should improve the zootechnical development of the animals. Gut flora stabilizers, microorganisms, typical or what we also often call probiotics or other chemically defined substances, which when fed to animals have a positive effect on the gut flora. Substances that might favorably affect the environment. You probably have heard, those who are not engaged in the animal health scene that much, of the methane expulsion of cattle and ruminants, basically. If you have a product that would reduce that, obviously that would be a positive environmental effect as an example. And there are also is a category of other zootechnical additives which would cover all the rest that you would want to define. Another product, as I mentioned before, that might be of interest for borderline products are biocides. A biocidal product is any substance or mixture in the form in which it is supplied to the user, consisting of containing or generating one or more active substances with the intention of destroying, deterring, rendering harmless, preventing the action of, or otherwise exerting a controlling effect on harmful organisms. So it's targeted on harmful organisms. It's not targeted at the animals that we are talking in animal health or for feeding. However, these harmful organisms may well be around the animal and may live in their fur or on the skin, and that might be an opportunity, or there are opportunities to license products that you may sell into the animal health arena under the Biocide regulation. So the harmful organism is defined here as an organism including pathogenic agents which has an unwanted presence or detrimental effect on humans, on animals, or the environment. The biocidal products regulation basically categorized 23 different product types. And the one which I believe is the most relevant for in the arena of animal health, certainly group 3, the pest control area, and within that the product type 18 and 19 dealing with insecticides, acaricide, and products to control other arthropods. The biggest market on the animal health side is parasitology, parasiticides. It constitutes 40% of the global market of animal health products. So that is a relevant market, and a lot of that is in the pet sector. So it is potentially the flea products, the tick products that you may purchase for your pets, but also, of course, we have those for food-producing animals. The activity there is either by means other than repulsion or attraction, defined here, so they would need to kill them in a way. The repellents obviously would ideally avoid that the harmful organisms would start to host on the animals, directly on the skin or indirectly in the environment of humans or animals. To move on to other, what I call or have summarized on the non-regulated products for animals. Of course, there is a huge area of medical devices on the human market, and a lot of these products, or quite a number of these products, are often intended also to sell or used by, especially I would say, human doctors for their horses, for their pets, and try if that wouldn't work. So where are we there? So the Medical Devices Directive is the fundamental 193/42, and we have lots of changes to this during the last kind of 20 years. And it applies to medical devices and their accessories. However, it applies to human beings only. That's very clearly stated. And therefore, if you want to use a medical device in animals, there are not any basic legal requirements. You could just do it as it is, but you have to look into the definitions of the medical device. You have probably done so. The intention to do it normally comes from an industry that has already registered medical devices. And as you, or part of you may know, they are normally controlled by certified bodies, and there are clear requirements for registration for these products. I don't want to go through this in too much detail, because in essence, in the EU we don't have a guideline for animals for medical devices, and therefore they could either categorize as a veterinary medicinal product, or they basically are completely non-regulated. You may remember what I said before on the veterinary medicinal products. If they are not covered by another regulation, they may potentially fall under this if you fall under the definition of a veterinary medicinal product. And this is exactly where you have to be careful if you want to do it. Simple class 1, 2 medical devices is probably rather falling under non-regulated products unless you use the terms of prevention and treating of disease. However, obviously if you sell it, and you can sell it to the animal health market, you have to be careful about your product liability issues as a producer, that you don't harm animals, animal welfare issues, that does not happen, and that you basically have tested them. If you have a licensed product on the human health side, I would say most of the times you have done sufficiently, unless you have to do extra work in the target species where you want to advertise it for, so to target animal species. Very similar it's with the cosmetics. Current legislation on cosmetics applicable for human use only. There is no such regulation in place for animals, to care for animals, to make their skin more lightful or whatever, so we don't have that. Therefore you can sell it. You may fall under different other legislation, like biocides, for example, if you have certain products as shampoo or something like this. But this applies to all products not falling under the scope of biocides, feed additives, feed or veterinary medicine products, and clearly not falling under those definitions by presentation or by function, as I explained before. So again, the point as a manufacturer or marketeer of these products is product liability, and you have to make sure that you don't fall into a gap there. Now to look a little bit into the regulatory differences and the requirements there. Obviously, if we have a non-regulated product, there's obviously no requirements. And I already stipulated what you have to do for those products. I tried to put a little bit here some tables in place to distinguish between the VMPs, the feed additives, and the biocides. Beate extrapolated before on the requirements for the VMP, which are here on the left-hand side, the national procedure, mutual recognition procedure, decentralized procedure, and centralized procedure. On the biocides, we have just implemented that we still have the national, obviously, as always had. We can now extrapolate these national procedures to mutual recognition procedures, but there is now for new products also the centralized procedure. What I think, at least if I read these regulations or directives, they all hint at a similar point. We want to have a common market in Europe, and therefore we want to have one. We want to have one dossier, one assessment, and finally one market to sell the product. And that is best done by a centralized procedure, which is valid for all the European market. Beate extrapolated where you must use a centralized procedure in the VMP sector. In the feed additive, there is no choice. We have a completely harmonized market. There is one agency, the European Food Safety Agency in Parma. And for the biocides, we have just started the process with the ECHA in Helsinki, where all new actives will need to be registered, and new products as well getting marketing authorizations. So we have got the European Medicines Agency in London, ECHA in Helsinki, and EFSA in Parma. And of course, they all report into the European Commission in Brussels, who basically grant the marketing authorizations. So the fundamental legislation I have mentioned before, on the VMP side, we still have a directive. I expect, although Beate said we are not, and I'm also not sure what we get, but it's very likely that we will get as a next legislation for veterinary medicinal products also a regulation. Obviously, there is a fundamental difference, and if we want to go to harmonization, then a regulation will help there much more than a directive. There is obviously fundamental requirements that you have to define what you want to license the product. For a VMP, described in an SPC, for the feed additive, also the product information and the label, and the same for the biocide. They all require some fundamental data on quality, safety, and efficacy. And I've just made in bold here where there may be a bit more emphasis why you may also decide to go for the one product for the one category or the one product for another one. Certainly one striking point is on the biocides part, the environment, if you are talking about a non-licensed active ingredient, because that gives you a lot of concern. The requirements are very high, and they're often higher than for a veterinary medicinal product or feed additive. Biocides are not used directly on the target animal, so the purpose is to use it around the animal. Therefore, you don't have to do target animal safety studies, as we call that in the animal health arena, while you have to do them in detail for veterinary medicinal products as well as for feed additives. And that's an extra cost, and they have to be done to GLP. GLP requirement is normally linked to the safety, GCP requirements for medicinal products in efficacy, but not for feed additives. They require good quality principles if you run studies. And in biocides, it's more rather going the GLP direction, both in the EU and the US. A fundamental difference, of course, is on the quality side, because for a veterinary medicinal product, you will have to have an active ingredient manufactured according to the pharmacopoeia requirements of GMP. What you don't have to do for feed or for biocides, there you have to follow the feed, basically have to have feed quality or biocide quality, which is significantly cheaper, as we know. The production, therefore, has to be done under GMP for a medicinal product with all the quality requirements that are present. In feed additives, the manufacturer has been licensed according to the FAMI QS quality system on the feed additive sector, and if you're talking about a feed, your manufacturer needs to be licensed according to the GMP Plus rules or quality requirements. And the biocides need to follow the chemical industry's requirements. All of these basically follow the dossier, and the dossiers are now harmonized. They all offer an electronic dossier, so you don't have to present it in paper anymore. But you still can for veterinary medicinal products, but that is, I assume, to be expiring within the next 2 years. And the evaluations already mentioned are done by a scientific committee at the relevant agencies, CVMP at the EMA, FeedUp at EFSA, and the Biocides Product Committee at the ECHA. The decision if a marketing authorization is granted or not is not taken by these committees. This decision is taken by the Commission, and they grant the marketing authorization. A specific issue is the maximum residue levels, especially for veterinary medicinal products, but they may also be necessary for feed additives or biocides that needs to be individually assessed. There's a regulation, a pan-European regulation in place since 2009 that was updated then from 1993, the regulation 470, which basically gives the requirements for the registration of a new active ingredient for veterinary medicinal products or wherever you need an MRL. And you have to provide there significant data of the metabolism, validated methodologies for the active ingredient, the residue studies that also may then end up at a withdrawal period, the calculations, you have to do critical summaries, and provide that as a separate application prior to the marketing authorization application to the European Medicines Agency. And that will take, and Beate stipulated this slightly again as well, you can submit that, or you have to submit that at least 1 year prior to your marketing authorization application of your product. Now, there are obviously other things than regulatory involved as well, financial and also commercial consequences, whatever you want to do. And as we as Glyphovet consult quite a variety of companies, of course the fundamental question is, where is the client or our client, or where are you based? Where do you come from? Where do you have your network, your expertise? On the one hand, you have to, the costs basically, the requirements are driven by the dossiers and research and development, as Beate said. The source of new products, there is little investment into really new product, active ingredient research in the animal health arena. What we do here, it's a market of just $22 billion worldwide, and the same on top for feed additives. There is not that much investment for that, or there is not money for that. So what we do is looking on the human side, on the crop protection side, and potentially other markets where we can source for new products or active ingredients that we can transfer into the animal health arena and generate there relevant turnovers and profits. Biocides is very similar. It's coming out of crop protection, the hygiene industry. Feed additives, often from food additives or individually generated. Feed obviously is often present as it comes from the nature itself or extracts of that. Medical devices, again, from the medical device industry, and cosmetics from cosmetic industry. And as mentioned, really on the right-hand side, these are very ballpark numbers. It is a huge variety. It depends if you want to license a generic. It depends how much data is in the public domain or in the applicant's domain already. It's a very broad range. So IFA Europe has certainly generated data at some point that the most expensive animal health product ever costed around 100 million, but probably including claim extensions and more than one species. At least that would be my call. Otherwise, I think they would have spent too much money on that. Biocides, again, a guess. Feed additives, cheaper, but there is a clear guidance. Of course, the higher regulated, the more money it is going to cost, and therefore there is a need for a fair competition to reflect that. So investment criteria also are obviously data protection. So for a veterinary medicinal product, and I'm talking here out of the patent situation, that's separate, and you are maybe aware of that, that applies of course where you can have patents. But pure data protection by your registration you get for VMPs, for biocides and feed additives, and that is normally starting with 10 years. But of course, and that starts with the first marketing authorization that you get for that active or product. The time to market, anything between 3 to 10 years, I would estimate, but it could even be shorter. A generic, I would say, is probably rather 2 years. Biocide, similarly, depends if you have your active already registered and just formulate a product, then of course it's shorter. Feed additives, very similar. And in feed or medical devices, cosmetics, if you have your product, if you have basically done your liability issues and you know that it is not dangerous for the animals, then you can probably market it within weeks if you have a partner to do so. So obviously the cost of production is also an issue, and because of the GMP thing that I mentioned before, I would categorize that the most costly is certainly the veterinary medicinal product, followed by the feed additive and the biocide. And that also comes from a cost of the active ingredient, starts there. The market for all of them, as I mentioned before, you can have a centralized authorization, and that covers the whole EU member states and normally also the EEA additional states. In a way, there is a free market, obviously, in Europe, but in a way it's not. It depends very much on your products. For pharmaceutical veterinary products, it's a little bit better than for biological products because you often need, on top, an import license into certain countries. It is quite surprising how innovative countries can be to protect their markets, and I think we all know that working in this arena, and you have really to look into much detail for that. Another thing, obviously, is the distribution channels you want to use. For a veterinary medicinal product, for food-producing animals, it's prescription only. For pets, it's not always. You can also have just pharmacy products. But it's a limited range that you can sell just via the pharmacies without prescription. So you have to be aware of the limitations of that. Finally, normally work via wholesalers or directly to the veterinarians. Again, this is also variable between EU member states. There are some member states where the veterinarian is not allowed to sell the products. Most of them still are allowed in most countries, but some have just to give prescriptions. And Beate mentioned it, the post-authorizations costs certainly are significantly higher on the veterinary medicinal products sector. There is a regular evaluation of the products within the first 5 years, then we get to longer terms. And the biocides, we have a 10 years term where they are re-evaluated as well. So, no doubt it's a complex issue, and not just for us as applicants or consultants or to move somebody to the registration, but also for the regulatory authorities or the political system. To allow for a fair competition, we want a harmonized market in EU countries across borders in the EU, and we still find products in one country categorized as one category of product, and another it is a very similar product sold under a different brand and different category in other countries. That can't be the way to a harmonized market, obviously. The objective, obviously, of the regulatory authorities is to protect the user, the environment, and the animals, and also the consumer, where we're talking about food-producing animals, and to avoid crisis, because all the feed crisis, feed additive crisis, feed crisis basically, that we have seen on food crisis, they always give a significant impact to our industry, whoever is involved, and obviously there is an objective to reduce that, and that is on the value, on the one side, inspectors to control it properly, and on the other side, the industry to follow reasonable guidance documents. Being aware of that, also the regulatory authorities have taken some action. So there is after the feed regulation came in place in 2011, fully in place, there was a need, or the Commission saw a need to basically define a bit more the borderlines between certain products. Similarly, as I just extrapolated, you can look at that. That's Commission Recommendation 2011-25, basically listing the different products and giving ideas for the distinction between feed materials, feed additives, biocidal products, and veterinary medicinal products. At the same time, the Commission obviously also asked the EMA to look into this, and they created a borderline working group at the CMDV level. So that basically the CMDV is a subgroup of the heads of medicines agency, also targeting at harmonizing the animal health market. And the mandate is clear: create a European borderline network, identify relevant legislation and European jurisprudence, identify the different areas of borderline products, agree on common understandings, minimize any differences in interpretation, provide input to the CMDV's legislation working group, and provide a forum to discuss the classification of specific products. You will find all these results. I hope you can read it. Otherwise, feel free to contact me, or the presentation will later be online. There are also borderline groups established in a variety of countries: in Belgium, in the Czech Republic, Hungary, Sweden, UK, Ireland. And the contact persons are also on the web, available on the HMA web page. In Germany, as we are here in Germany, just a comment that is normally due to our specific situation with the federal states. It's down to the Landesämter or Regierungsbehörden who basically do the inspections, and they are basically responsible to control it and also give advice on this. As an example, the Belgium group is quite driving it, and Dries Minne, basically heading that group, gave a presentation at one of the previous seminars that we organized, and they have basically made up decision trees for certain products, here for the veterinary medicinal claims, if it is a medicinal claim or not, and what is the consequence of this. And again, just a bit of summarizing: we have these different groups, as I showed before, and we have shampoo, hoof oils, we have teat and other products, disinfectants kind of. We have colostrum, which we basically collect from cows and then give to calves, and sometimes also to calves of other cows. We have nutraceutical products, and we may also, and we have to differentiate them. They all make claims. They are sold with a certain presentation. If we're talking about feed, obviously, or plant extract, active substances, there is a need for definition. We have, on the biocides area, as I mentioned, anti-parasitical products. Again, the claim is of importance. The application, we have here also the teat dips, which may be of relevance if they are veterinary medicinal products, which is a tendency to now categorize them as such by the regulators, or if they are just care products for the skin, but if you want to make claims for prevention of mastitis with a teat dip, then obviously you are under the definitions of a VMP. Similar for cosmetics, the claims you make is a real important part. And I mentioned before, but I don't go into detail here, stem cells, blood and plasma products that are coming on the market as new therapeutic agents, which are sometimes regulated and sometimes not. And you will probably have to consult with regulatory authorities how to handle this. Good. Important is, if you want to find a decision how you want to go with your product, is that you know what you want yourself. Where is your company targeting at? Where are your distribution lines? Where have you most competence? And then you have to start to differentiate that product clearly, if you don't want to end as a VMP, from the definitions of a VMP. You cannot make any claim that is talking about disease, prevention, or treating. Very simple, but I shouldn't tell you. I would say at least 70% of people contacting us come with such a claim and say, how can we manage that as a feed additive, feed, or whatever? So it's just not working. And that's something to clear. What does not mean that you can be innovative and find nice wordings around these terms. And that is I think, the innovation you can do. So again, by function, normally that is less a problem, but by presentation is often an issue. And obviously you should do good SWOT, gap, and risk analysis for your product that you want to do and to differentiate for the different objectives. I don't go through this, the time, well, it's not too bad. So obviously if you talk about a VMP, there are certain strengths, treatment, prevention claim you can make, so that gives you added value, of course. It has a high ethical profile, you may have brand-specific protection, you may end up a higher sales price, selling it through veterinarians or directly to pharmacies. The opportunities is potentially high profit per unit, possibility to select key markets, national or European, also from a registrational process. probably you can create best value here, but there are also weaknesses. It's high cost to get there. With all the different things I already mentioned, it's a very controlled market. You can only sell on prescription in most of the cases, so you have to keep that in mind, and it may have a significant consequence. And there are threats to all markets, and you can run through that. So if you compare that for a feed additive, it's also a brand-specific approval. You get a protection of 10 years. You have an option to create other products based on that authorized feed additive. So you can combine that with other feed products and basically create quite innovative products, also high price and high valued products in the pet market, for example, which is quite frequently done. It's an attractive market. It's slightly less regulated, especially after you have obtained your marketing authorization. Costs are significantly less at that point. Certainly has a consumer-friendly image, sales to feed mills, so you don't need to sell through pharmacies or vets. You can do that, but you don't have to. You can potentially do also high volumes if you want, but you can also create very nice individual treatments for certain animals. So you have lots of different potentials. However, there are weaknesses. It's still to show the efficacy of these feed additives is certainly a good challenge for a lot of companies. And it often ends up not just in 3 studies, but in 10 that you reach at 3, and that costs a lot of money. Authorization limited to the target species and claim, so it is very specific, but also obviously that gives you protection against your competitors potentially. Still relatively expensive. Threats, as always, are present. We could do the same with the biocides, looking similarly. Therefore, I just finish here. Very important is that you know yourself what you want, the category of your products, where it could end up, do good analysis, which ways you can potentially go and the consequences. The VMP certainly is the most expensive, but also the longest to the market, potentially the highest profit, at least per dose. Other product legislation is available and you can take the options, and there are more coming on the market, have come on the market with a new feed regulation. Feed additives before and biocides. Medical device and cosmetics, you are reasonable free unless you fall under the definitions of a VMP. Therefore, it's an easy going in a way. But be careful. It's all about the presentation normally, because the function is defined normally quite clearly. And therefore, have a look before you put it on the market, before the inspectors come and give you a warning that you sell a veterinary medicinal product, although you label it as a feed. So that may be the worst thing, and then you're in trouble and have to take your product off the market. Better you know that in advance. There are lots of links to different websites, basically, but I'm sure you find that on Eurolex, Europe. You find all the legislations, obviously, that are issued by the Europeans. Much more difficult, of course, is finding the national legislation, which is often a national language, and giving that interpretation is another good challenge if you really want to enter these markets. Good. That's it for today, at least from my end. I'm very open for questions. I hope you enjoyed the presentation.
Good morning. I'm involved in the API business. Then this is a question in this territory of gray. Is possible that the same substance that could be considered API for a veterinary product could be used with a claim of nutrition just because the dosage? And if yes, I like. Well.
There are some examples where we have that. That's typically in vitamins. We already have that in potentially trace elements products. For a lot of others, it's questionable. The regulators don't like it too much. You have to be careful. But if your product categorizes in different ways, I think you would probably be able to, with some exemptions. I would be careful. You have to assess it carefully. Yeah. With the biocides, the biocidal regulation obviously provides for that. That's clear. We have lots of products, which we have both as veterinary medicine products, and we have in other formulations on the as biocides.
Yeah, but the question, in fact, is what's coming now is concerning the GMP in those cases that are not really veterinary products? How you identify it in front of authorities? For instance, the first cut that is at customs, being in Europe, as I think you are also. To defend in case of they ask about the GMP status when this product will not be used for a veterinary product. This is the question, in fact.
So if you want to use it as an API for manufacturing, or sell directly to the feed
sell
industry?
To somebody that will use in feed, but we had some problems that they request to us the requirements as it was veterinary when it was not going for this purpose.
Well, that's customs legislation. I'm not that familiar with that, to be honest. I'm quite happy to look into it, but I can't answer the question directly. Of course, like for veterinary medicinal products, you also, where APIs you bring in reasonably easy, formulated products much more difficult. You have to do an EU release. And the same is you certainly have to provide appropriate quality data of your feed if you want to bring it in, I'm pretty sure, yeah. And there must be traceable where it goes. So basically the whole thing always comes from the Codex Alimentarius white paper. Where does it all come from, to which quality, and where does it go?
Good morning, thank you very much. So in your opinion, I can have, for instance, a line of products of medical devices and cosmetic products just for animals? Is it possible?
Potentially you can have that, yes.
Yes, potentially the same line for humans and the same line for animals?
You can basically, well, as long as it does not fall under one, well, normally it would fall, if at all, under the veterinary medicinal product. If it's just a care product, you just have to make sure that you comply with other regulations, but there is nothing specific for use in animals.
Okay.
As a GMP question, can we manufacture cephalosporin with beta-lactam for veterinary in the same plant?
Could you repeat?
Yes.
Can you manufacture beta-lactams and?
Beta-lactam and cephalosporins. You know, in a human we cannot, but for veterinary field you can or not?
No, it's the same regulation there. You have to split it. You don't agree?
Maybe not, because there is cephalosporin and beta-lactam for animal. There is no reason to separate it like a human. But
what is your question? If you can manufacture an animal product, beta-lactam for animals in the same facility where you produce a human beta-lactam?
No. All for animal,
just
animal
for
field.
Beta-lactams and cephalosporins?
Beta-lactam for animal, for cows, and cephalosporin also. We can manufacture the same field or same plant.
In principle, I would think yes. At least I know a couple of factories who do that. But I think you may have to have a separate line. I would need to check. I'm not 100% sure on this.
Okay. You know, because
where are you located? In which country?
No, I'm from Jordan. Jordan, Middle East.
In Germany, yeah, okay. Well, we can discuss it, but then if you are interested in further information on this, I would just like to alert you that we will be hosting a conference on 30th and 31st of January in Munich on strategies and the development of veterinary medicinal products. So if you are interested in that, we'll be happy to see you there. Thank you.